Well, our story today begins amidst a huge stone wall, near which the main members of the academy surrounded a guy who was holding onto his arm in pain, and was visibly injured because he did not engage them in a duel. The girl looked at him again and said she was now giving him one last chance. They wanted to know his motive for coming to Asker Academy, so they started mocking him. But Hai Ming was serious and realized that this room had been locked down by an enchantment, and his chances of escape were slim. He also realized that if he began to fight them unexpectedly, it might arouse quite a lot of suspicion among his enemies. But he also thought that if he didn't, there might not be a future where he could fight back. The girl realized that the guy was not just silent and turned to Victor, who immediately began to respond and move everything around, including the law enforcement officers. He stood in front of the guy, who was still holding onto his arm in pain, showing that he wasn't a threat. Then he took out his chains and wrapped them around his arm, and at the end of them were also sharp spikes, which he threw sharply in the direction of the boy. The guards also began waving their weapons on the ground in preparation for the attack. And now, after a few seconds, they were all practically at arm's length, in front of the Lord of Sea, who was still playing the role of a defenseless apprentice. He kept thinking about what he should do. Even though time was short, he had to make a decision here and now, lest he be destroyed. So he immediately ordered First Seal to appear, which instantly jumped out with great speed, and a second later, the guy already had a sword as well, with which he masterfully destroyed the guard who wanted to destroy him. He also looked to the side to check the situation, but the Guardian was definitely no longer a threat, as the Seal of Envy had worked on him, blowing the enemy off the face of the earth. The girl was very surprised by this because she did not expect any resistance at all. At this moment, Hai Ming was already behind the back of the other guy who wanted to destroy him, and apparently did not expect any repulse because he was very scared. He looked in his direction and was surprised, but immediately a water sword blow flew in his direction, which he managed to catch very quickly on reaction with his chains. So a very real fight broke out between them. Victor began to worry because it was really very close, and Hai Ming's hand was tied to the chain, which severely constrained his movements and prevented him from working. So with a sharp movement of his second hand, he made his blow, which flew straight into the head of his offender, which he obviously could not have expected and was shocked. It flew back a few dozen meters and broke the ground with itself. But the guy was unstoppable. He immediately turned to Leviathan to activate the second seal as well. The girl already panicked and quickly ran up to her boyfriend to ask if he was okay, but he could not say anything because he was in a lot of pain. This made her very angry, and she looked toward the new member of the academy, who had already gotten a taste of the battle and was ready to continue, weapon in hand. She noticed that he actually hid his true strength, and it seems there really is something off about him. So she instantly waved her magic stick and ordered the guardians of the Thunder God to deal with it and destroy it. When they heard their orders, they immediately rushed into battle, but Hai Ming easily outpaced them, rushing in with swords to meet them. And so, having made a step, he attacked first the first guard from the back, which he did not expect, for which he was destroyed. But at that moment, his partner was also in the back of the guy, so he rushed to retaliate and make a sword blow. It was very close to his head, but he reacted in time. The style of the tides, Water Pierce, was immediately activated. It was he who immediately surrounded the guard completely and created a protective field for the guy, adding to his strength. The girl didn't want to fall behind either, so she summoned the destructive thunder of the universe. Everything around her went black. She waved her wand and said that, in accordance with the ancient contract made upon numerous peaks, "Listen to my call and strike forth here." She was very angry and frightened at the same time. Immediately after that, lightning and swift thunder activated, after which everything went black and only white glare was visible in some places, which made the guy a little worried. He looked that way and just thought of a plan for how he would need to react in battle. And so it begins. The girl herself shouting to the guy that she is ready to fight and launching white lightning bolts in his direction. Suddenly, green trees appeared, which also suddenly began an attack. Behind them immediately appeared a girl with green hair, who immediately ordered them both to stop, and a second later, all those trees completely surrounded and rewound the guy, protecting him from lightning strikes. He also stopped to see who she was and why she had come here, so he began again to pretend to be a defenseless student. To the side was some obscure portal made of twigs from which Student Council President Julia Warrister, who was quite a nice and calm girl, began to emerge. Cindy panicked and was shocked, because she hadn't expected to see her at all. She wondered why would her dearest older sister suddenly come here. She realized that she could not drag her older sister into this problem, realizing that she had to handle and solve it all on her own. So she ran up to her and asked, "Did you come here for something?" But the president was very serious. She asked if the girl really started bullying a newcomer again. She was immediately embarrassed and tried to cover it up by denying her guilt. Trying to justify herself, she said she only wanted to test out this year's newcomer's ability. But she looked at her with suspicion and approached the guy, saying, "We are sorry. Please forgive my vice president's insolence." The guy was very happy and shocked at the same time, so he didn't even know what to say. But the good news was that he didn't have to use and prove his power. The girl at this point kept looking at the guy with suspicion, which he also instantly noticed. He sensed that the girl was trying to tell him something with her mind, mostly threats of reprisal if the boy said anything extra. So the girl said that her dearest older sister better not hear anything extra from him. She stood there with her eyes closed, hoping the guy would say what she really needed to say. And so he got embarrassed and tried to start his speech by saying that the first thing to do was to prioritize leaving. Could he leave right now? The president, of course, agreed and told him to follow her, pointing to the exit. Then she turned to the girl and said that they would go out first, and she would come out after them. And so Hai Ming successfully managed to escape and leave the room, hiding and barely using his powers in battle. Victor immediately approached Cindy asking, "Are you really letting him go scot-free?" But she started smiling and asked, "When did she say that?" A very cryptic plan for revenge appeared in her mind, so she asked, "Why should I let him go?" And when there were no more threats, the girl offered to write a report to the old man first, then talk about the matter of this newcomer. She looked out the window and tried to switch gears a little and get away from the situation. Meanwhile, it was a very bright, clear day at the academy. But her thoughts wouldn't leave her. For example, now that she was thinking about it, wasn't their dearest older sister really cool just now? Well, the cat had already tried to sneak in through the window to observe the situation as well, so it immediately ran up to its master, who was walking along with the president of the academy. She was very surprised that he was hurt, and tried to find out what had happened, but the guy didn't want to answer, saying it was nothing. Kat also turned her attention to the girl with green hair, asking who she was. But Hai Ming said it would be really problematic to explain, so he offered to talk after they got out of here. He really hoped that his identity was not exposed. At that moment, a girl with glasses, holding a book in her hand, burst into the hallway and started shouting, "Miss Worcester! It is great that you are here." Then she got as close to her as she could and told her that her help was badly needed in the teacher's lounge. But the guy couldn't stop thinking about the president's last name. Was she really a Worcester? He immediately remembered the old sage who had addressed him, saying if you one day met up with the little Missy from the Worcester family, give this to her. It was some very valuable green talisman that was handed to the guy. He looked at it, and at the time could not yet understand that it could really help him one day. But his thoughts were immediately dispelled when the president of the academy addressed him. She apologized again for what had just happened, and said she would order Cindy not to do it again. Well, now she will be leaving now because she has something she needs to do. But the guy stopped her immediately, even though he was very worried. He pulled out this green pendant and started waving it around. The girl immediately noticed it and was very surprised. The girl was very surprised when she took this pendant in her hands, for it belonged to her family. Immediately afterwards, she became very thoughtful, and she wondered why it was in the hands of this newcomer. She turned to him and was very wary, asking what his full name would be. The guy was a little embarrassed, but still answered that he was Hei Ming Oceanus. But call me Hei Ming for short. In any case, it's still a made-up name. At this point, the president continued her dialogue with him. Student Hei Ming? May I ask for some of your time? Sure. And she took him for a walk around the academy together, which surprised him a bit. 2 other female students immediately ran up to the girl and stood next to her. But the guy couldn't help thinking it was Julia Worcester. He watched her, the way she acted, and realized that there really is someone like her. He looked at her again, and finally, after living for so long, I can say for certain. But his assistant, who turned into a cat to be less conspicuous, interrupted him by saying that it seems that all of the students here, no matter if they are a commoner or a noble, really like the president. It also alarmed him and made him think. He immediately remembered Cindy, who was very mean and unpleasant, adding that both of them are young misses of a ducal family, but her personalities is the complete opposite of the one from the Sandal family. This phrase really alarmed the assistant, so she decided to ask again seriously what was really going on in the meeting room just now. Right now, he was thinking about that question, because when they were searching through the student records in the library, he doesn't remember seeing a Julia Worcester on the name list, and that is very strange. He became very tense and realized that, to be more accurate, he saw a barely legible sentence that seemed to spell out Julia Worcester, for there was also a very old picture of her. So he began to think that the student council president was supposed to be called Julia Avaster. The cat was also not left out and added that he also believed that grandfather's information was off. But suddenly the girl stopped them and said they had arrived at the place, then asked them to pass, holding out her hand. It was the same room as the last time. It looked like it was also the living room. The girl put a mug of tea on his table, which was exactly the same as at the beginning of the story, which really surprised Hai Ming. He thanked her and sat behind the couch with his hands on his knees, as a true student should, which is what he claims to be. The girl handed him the pendant and asked him to explain what it was and where he got it. She was very surprised and frightened because she didn't expect to see it at all, especially from a new student. Hai Ming was also really excited about this conversation, though he tried to look as serious as possible. Still, he wondered if he should tell her the truth, because the fact was that Grandfather Hai was the previous generation's Lord of the Sea, and communicating with nobles from the mainland is a breach of the boundary treaty. Still, he decided to be a little silent and not tell it. So he started blushing and made up a whole other story, adding that it was from a family elder. The girl listened very carefully to his story, and tears began to well up in her eyes. After that, she pulled him sharply against her and exhaled only the phrase, "So it's like that." The guy was a little surprised by this. He was very surprised that the girl wasn't planning to ask him any more questions. There was a bit of a strange and tense atmosphere. So the boy decided to cough and try to explain the situation of the pendant to the girl, adding that the elder from his family told him that if he showed this pendant to Miss Worcester, he would be able to receive her help. She didn't deny anything. That's right, because it is a token between the Worcester family and a very specific person, and whoever has this pendant can use it to ask her family for a reasonable request. The assistant was also very surprised. What does very specific person mean? Is it Grandfather Hai? Does that old man have connections with someone like her? But she couldn't get away from the feeling that this young miss might be hiding something very important from them. Now Hai Ming decided to fulfill her first request, saying that he would like the authorization to search through all the Academy's files. As the student council president, she should be able to get that for him, right? He realized that he was still blocked from using magic during his nightly trips to the information center, so he wouldn't want to make too much noise. The president was very alarmed by such a request, because then, what is he trying to do? But he said he was only looking for information and had absolutely no intention of doing anything wrong. At least if she believes in the owner of this pendant. She hesitated and looked him in the eye, then sighed and said she had no problem giving him permission. But she also had a condition. Immediately after that, the academy appeared in front of us, in one of the offices of which rather strange and scary things were happening. Cindy was standing outside a large room with a huge monster sitting in the middle of the room, before whom she reported on the situation and everything that was going on in the academy. It was Principal Leon Jellins, to whom Cindy began to tell what had just happened. As for the student who feels similar to the seal, it is a newcomer from the freshman class. Hai Ming Oceanus, and she knows exactly how to deal with him. Leon listened to her and wondered if that child has something to do with the seal. Cindy wondered, because I'm 90% sure it's true. Then Leon said that child is truly and started rocking in his chair, adding that let her do whatever she wants. She understood and said she would go first. Then she opened the door abruptly and said she would continue her search for the seal, but she hopes Principal Jellins will remember their deal. It was dealing about the whereabouts of the traitor in the Worcester family. Maybe Principal take note of it. Victor was waiting for her at the entrance and was very surprised that the girl was able to finish so quickly. But she was really very angry. She couldn't help thinking that the old man's attitude toward the newcomer seemed a bit weird. She immediately ordered Victor to go and call Leo and Siege, as there were several things they would need to attend to. Little Miss from the Sandal family, no sense carrying the previous generation's vengeance on her back. Meanwhile, Leon Jellins continued to rock in his chair, surprised that they came to him so quickly. And then, a second later, dark trails began to emerge from every corner of the room, similar to those that had been in the library before. As suddenly, they began to twist very sharply near the chair, after which the answer of arrival was not long in coming. Leon asked him if those people were prepared to defeat that child, to which the arriving monster smiled and said yes, they were. These seemed to be the same participants who were then playing a chess game and discussing all the events. Leon then ordered him to do things according to their instructions, to which he kindly agreed and smiled. And so, after a few seconds, having received the necessary instructions, the monster instantly disappeared, and the grandfather who was sitting in that chair began to think about what was happening, mentally addressing him with the phrase, "Child who came from the sea, I do hope that you won't threat blame me."